Books. We all love books, don't we? Especially when it comes to Doctor Who. Whether it's Doctor Who the Encyclopedia, Doctor Who Storybook 2007, or even Longbarrow. Or my holy bible, Doctor Who the Writer's Tale by Russell T Davies and Benjamin Cook. Anyways, I wanted this chance to talk about something old, something new, something borrowed, but not necessarily something blue. This being the target range of Doctor Who books, which were originally published between 1973 and 1994, and have now returned to do New Who in its ever-expanding range. As of the recording, 9 books have been released, with a 10th, which will be the Novelisations of the series 9 stories, The Zygon Invasion / The Zygon Inversion. But what about the rest of the books? Are they any good? Do they better their own TV stories, or would they be better suited to the bargain bin? Well, let's read on, shall we? We start off, of course, with the first book, which is Rose, written by current Doctor Who showrunner and writer of the original episode, Russell T Davies. Overall, I think this book was really great. If you like the episode, then I think you'll like the novel. Russell's writing is fantastic, even when writing prose, as it grips you in with every development, however big or small it may be. It's like witnessing one of his TV episodes at your own reading leisure. He keeps many of the great moments of the original episode whilst also adding in some brand new elements at the same time. Basically, the book doesn't read as a one-to-one copy of the original, and I think that's perfect. It means that anybody wanting to watch the original has their version, but if anybody wants something different, then Russell's got them covered, which I think is a great idea, and when we get into the rest of the books, you wish that idea was kept throughout. I'd have to say my favourite part would be Chapter 6, entitled Life at Number 90, where we get to experience the life of Mickey Smith and his new made-for-book friends Mook and Patrice, who are partners, attracted to each other, and Sally Salter, who run a band called No Hot Ashes. In this chapter alone we get the usual Russell homely feel, which is always one of his better aspects in his era, just in one chapter, which for some writers would be hard to provide, but with Russell, even if the chapter is as short as a couple of pages, he makes sure to keep it all in, which is honestly why I love this small and homely chapter. Honestly, I cannot begin to tell you how much you're missing from just this one book. If you want to start your Target experience, then do it with this one. Next up was the second book release, which was The Christmas Invasion, originally written by Russell T Davies and now written by Jenny Colgan, a romantic comedy and Doctor Who novelist behind Dark Horizons, Into the Nowhere and In the Blood, and some big Finish audios like Time Reaver, 1 Mile Down and Life Experience. Overall, I'd have to say this one was really good and took me by surprise on how good it really was. Unlike with Russell, when I first read this, I wasn't sure how Jenny was going to be able to translate this great episode into this book, but after reading it a couple of times, one of these times being in Japan, I really think I got what she did with the novel and with this book. She definitely made it her own, whilst also respecting Russell's vision at the same time. I have to say I really like the inclusion of Born Again, the 2005 Children in Need minisode put into the book, as it translates well into the stories of Rose trying to believe that this new doctor is hers. But this time, I'd have to say my favourite parts are any of the new things added in, such as the Guinevere 1 team, who are really trying their hardest at the mission of theirs, but because of the Cigarettes, their mission is ultimately a failure, which I feel really sad for, and I'm glad they did, because that shows some great writing in the small doses that this team were used in. But apart from all that, if you like the episode, you'll like this one. Next up was the third book release, which was The Day of the Doctor, written by past showrunner and writer of the original episode, Stephen Moffat. Overall, I'd have to say this is the one book which I really wasn't a fan of, which is kind of sad in all honesty. I was really looking forward to seeing how Stephen would translate one of his biggest episodes to prose, and well, it came off more gimmicky than quality reading material. Now, if I had to say any good things about it, it's when it gets straight down to the characters and how they interact in the story. I think this is where Stephen really does try his best, and what he did to make them very likeable, and worth being for the whole adventure. However, I'm not a fan of everything else. The fact that this book structure is all there, but there's this silly way of numbering chapters and the references and the fourth wall breaking, just took me out of the story. As I said before, it's more gimmicky than anything, and I don't think that the story needed it. I think if it had just been the overall story and Moffat's writing, but I think he tried too much to have fun whilst writing, and it just didn't turn out too good. Next up is the fourth book release, the last one in the original 2018 releases, which is Twice Upon a Time, originally written by Stephen Moffat and now written by Paul Cornell. Overall, this is probably one of the ones which I prefer the Target novelisation over the original episode. The original suffered from being a last-minute script by Moffat, but I think from the change of writer from Moffat to Cornell really made it work. My favourite thing about the book would probably be the way he redeemed the characterisation of the first Doctor in the story. Now yes, David Bradley was a great choice to play the first Doctor, but I think the writing by Moffat really let him down. Luckily in the novel, Paul gets that and writes him more to be a person who is young at heart, but doesn't quite know what to do in this situation, but still does everything that he can to help. It's so much more pure, and I'm glad that Paul was able to put this into the story. But I'm also glad he was able to keep the other characters in check at the same time, which I think would be too hard for some writers, but Paul really does it well. The first in a new 2021 set of releases, which was Dalek, by the writer of the original episode, Robert Shearman. Overall, this one turned out to be a very enjoyable read. Robert was able to provide us with a lot of the same content, but with added thrills, which I really enjoyed. My favourite parts would have to be when we go into the chapters of the POV of some of the characters involved in the story, such as Simmons, the Dalek torturer, Henry Van Staten, Diana Goddard, and even the Dalek. Some of the material in this one really goes into the characters and how different the book portrays them, but I will give Robert the benefit of the doubt by saying that the Dalek's POV chapter may be the weirdest, but it certainly was a one which I couldn't put down. Next up is the 6th book released, the second in a new 2021 set of releases, which is The Crimson Horror by writer of the original episode, Mark Gatiss. Before I started to read this book, I was told by many people that this one was going to be a slog to get through, or one of the worst ones. So, can I just ask what they were talking about? Because overall, this one was actually good, and I think underrated in my opinion. Now this book is very different. It's done like the memoirs of Jenny Flint, the wife of Madame Vastra. Now I did argue beforehand in saying that the reason I didn't like the Day of the Doctor novel was because it felt too gimmicky. But I feel this one works more on how it uses its gimmick. Day had its gimmick mess with the novel, but Crimson allows it to help with the structure of the novel, which I felt was a better idea overall. My favourite parts have to be the backstory. The first couple of chapters where we get to see Jenny and Madame Vastra meet up with the Doctor in the early days of the Paternoster Investigations gang, leading up to the events of The Good Man Goes to War. It felt like the missing character history that I wish the TV show would have done with the characters. Mark really gets them, and I think this book really would have shown us what a Paternoster gang spin-off truly would have been like had it been written by somebody like Mark, who definitely knows his stuff. Next up is the 7th book released, the third one in the new 2021 set of releases, by original episode writer Joy Wilkinson. Overall, I came to like The Witchfinders very much, although that had to be because this is the last novel I read for this video, so I was really looking forward to it after reading a later one which I didn't like. I did like all the stuff that Joy kept in this adaptation of it. It felt true to the original episode and didn't do any gimmicks to deviate itself to try a different story. I would say that this novel is a case of if you liked the episode and wanted another version of it, then you could probably read this one. I came to like it mostly due to the previous fact of me liking the episodes in Series 11, but I did end up having a favourite part, which is the fate of Wilma, which I won't reveal because it happens to be at the end of the book, but I think for people who really like the character from the original episode, you might like what happens here. Next up is the 8th book released, the first one in the 2022 set of releases, which is The Fires of Pompeii, by writer of the original episode, James Moran. Overall, I think I like this book more for the entertainment value of the story than how it changed for prose. The Fires of Pompeii was a great story for Series 4. I was glad that the great quality stuck with the release of this Target novel, written by its original author, which I thought would have been hard to do, but Moran made sure to keep it. If I had to give my favourite parts of the book, then it would be the expansion of the Caecilius family. In the TV episode, they did get some great moments, especially from Caecilius and Quintus. But obviously with the TV episode length, the family did feel like they were missing some key character moments. With the novel, it seems that everybody feels definitely more at home, so to speak, and that they feel more like a human family would feel. It's something that I'm glad Moran kept in check, because it's a small little thing in the episode overall, but it's a nice thing in balance. And finally, we have the 9th book released, as the second one in the 2022 set of releases, which is The Eaters of Light, by the writer of the original episode, Rona Munro. Overall, I really wanted to like this one, especially that I've come round more on the episode since its broadcast in summer of 2017, where I was somewhat negative to it due to it being very close to the amazing finale that happened afterwards. And with this version of the story, I did tend to like more things of it, such as the branching of the underutilized characters of the Pict Army and the 9th Roman Legion, as much as the written word would allow, which Monroe did very well. However, what was the major thing that did take me out of the book was the second part of it, which is the long backstories of Cara and Lucius, which ended up taking too much space in the book, as it dragged along from page to page. It was interesting enough to give them the backstory, but I do wish it would have been a shorter length, or it would have been condensed to the odd chapters between parts in the story. That way it would probably flow better overall. And with that comes the end of my tale of the new Who Target novels. I certainly enjoyed my time with them, and I came out with 7 good books that I could solely recommend on being good to really brilliant. But still, that was my opinion. I hope that I've got somebody to read at least one of them, even my less favourable ones, to maybe see what I'm talking about and perhaps prove me wrong. But anyways, I think that's enough reading for me. I can't wait to see what comes next, and as always, I'll be seeing you, my friends.